And here's part two, okay? We're going to pick up where we left off. The Ophites worshiped the snake. They worshiped Satan. A symbol of the sect was a snake. But those people really didn't worship the snake. They worshiped Satan, who is symbolized in the snake. In more recent times, there's a group called the Yazidi. Okay, they're in the Druze mountains of Syria. And the Yazidi are devil worshippers. They're very much like the Ophites. The Yazidi worship the devil, and the emblem of their religion is the snake. And this is the perversions of a deep wickedness of calling good and calling God that God himself has cursed. Okay, so snakes are still associated with paganism, still associated with the occult. Even the medical snake that's on the symbol of medicine comes from the cult snake worship in Corinth. So God has permanently given us a symbol of a vanquished Satan. So much for the natural serpent. How about the supernatural Satan of the supernatural spirit? Verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. Now here you have God speaking, not to the snake, but to Satan. Not to the natural serpent, but to the supernatural spirit. From the symbol of the reality, discussing wretched Satan, who may move around like a roaring lion, but in reality, he's a lowly snake. And by the way, he doesn't speak. He had a lot to say in the garden. He has nothing to say when he's standing before God. We had a lot to say to Eve, had a lot to say in the garden. But when God started declaring these curses, he had nothing to say. God is the sovereign God because he's God all by himself. God alone speaks. His rebellion failed in heaven and it has failed on earth. And Satan is subject to God's judgment. And what you have in verse 15 is God's judgment on Satan. And I don't have time to develop all of this, but what I want to do is pretty much just try to get as far as I can. But I do want to give you the sense of what this is all about. Here's what Satan is thinking. I fell to a degree in heaven, and yet I succeeded. I was thrown out of heaven, but I took a third of the angels with me. Okay? So I have my kingdom. I came to earth, cast down. Revelation chapter 12 says, and he goes into the garden, and he's still trying to take over for God. He's trying to be as sovereign as he possibly can in his own right. And he is successful in capturing Adam and Eve. He's successful here. And at that point, Satan may well have felt that he had made a massive dent in the divine purpose, that God had gone to all this wondrous effort to create a universe and to place man and woman in his universe on this earth. And it was so magnificent, and it was a paradise like the original paradise of heaven before the angels were thrown out. And Satan succeeded in wrecking paradise. He succeeded in gaining the devotion of Adam and Eve. He succeeds in tearing up marriages. He succeeds in wayward children. He succeeds in society with greed and hunger and poverty. He succeeded here. And that is really essential in what happened. It's very essential to what has happened here. Eve believed Satan instead of God, and Adam believed his wife. He just went along with his wife. Adam wasn't deceived specifically by Satan, but he could see Eve, and she wasn't dead. And Satan had said, you can eat this, and you will be like God. And God doesn't like people to be like him. This is what Satan was saying to Eve, because he doesn't like competition. He's really trying to hold something back. He's trying to prevent you from getting something wonderful and good. He's trying to hold back the opportunity of a lifetime that you can be just like him. And I know, he said in the days that you eat, you're going to die, but you're not going to die. And Eve ate and she didn't die. But the death that he was proclaiming was not a physical death. It was a spiritual death, but eventually you will die physically. And Adam said, well, wow, this would be great. She didn't die. She's still alive. I'll be like God, etc., etc., etc. And they both believe the lie. And so Satan now realized that he has engaged himself with man and become a kind of a sovereign individual over them. And now Adam and Eve here believes him instead of believing God. And it's very likely that Satan may as well point to them that I have won the full devotion of humanity. I have won the mother of all living, as Eve was called in verse 20. And I got Adam, by my side. Adam, he's with me. He doubts God. He questions God and he believes me. And now Satan, he could be saying, I have captured humanity and now they will, aid me in my efforts to overthrow the Lord, or overthrow the Almighty God. And now I have a third of the angels with me as well. And I know all of all the humans. They're not many, but it's a start. And Satan may well have thought that he had become the sovereignty of man and mankind, that he had become sovereign over the race. And now he was in charge of the human race. And if Adam and Eve, who were perfect, fell so easily, what would imperfect sinners do before the onslaught of his temptation? You can see him beginning to lick his chops and rub his hands and think to himself, I now have not only demons, but I have men to fight battle with me against the Almighty God. And that's why God says what he says. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head and you shall bruise him on the heel. Satan, you were absolutely wrong. Enmity means conflict. Enmity means hostility. Enmity means hatred. And God said to him, don't think too fast about your successes, because I curse you, Satan, by making you the enemy of the woman and the enemy of the seed of the woman. And one will come who will crush your head. Now, that's a very direct answer to the assumption that must have been in the mind of Satan, that he had just acquired some great power, pulled off this great coup, and now had total control over the man and the woman. And immediately God says, I will put enmity, conflict, hostility, hatred. You will not rule easily. You will not rule successfully. You will not have complete control. I will bring humanity into conflict with you every step of the way. Now listen to this. There was already enmity in the world, but the enmity was between man and whom? And God? No, there wasn't at this point any enmity between man and Satan. Adam and Eve had followed Satan. There was no hostility there. There was no enmity there. And you don't find them running around the garden after they had sinned, hiding from the serpent. Who are they hiding from? God. There was enmity there between them and God. Satan could see, or he could sense or know, that there was very likely, Satan concluded, I got him now. It's kind of like what he do with the people today. They think their grass is greener. They get over there and like, and it goes well for a while. And then, boom, he said, I got him. And then they say, man, it's like someone changing a job. They leave one job, go to another, and they say, I couldn't stand that job. I was like, this is so great over here. And then they come to find out that that job is just like the other one, or it's worse. And they're wondering, man, I could have stayed over there because at least I was vested. I had years over there. And now I'm over here and I got to get vested again. And this place is worse than the one I just left. And it's like different relationships. It's like when people, they think they can bounce from one marriage to another. They think they can bounce from one person to another. And this is what happens. And this is what happens. And people, it's not just a specific individual, because everyone likes to look at the man. You got to look at everybody. You just can't look at the man. You look at the woman too. But that's a whole nother story. We got to stop this one-sided stuff. It's like this sin is greater than that one. No, sin is sin. Sin is equal across the board. And we need to understand that. Okay? But the enmity was between them and God. Okay? There was a desire for them to run from God, not to God. To hide from God, because they don't see God. They don't listen, and he's not their friend anymore. He's not talking to them. They see God as their enemy now, when they used to see him as a friend. So Satan is going to conclude this couldn't be any better for him than what he had already done. God immediately steps in and says, guess again, the enmity that I'm going to put between you and the woman, it's here, brother. It's here. You're not going to have, this with me. You're going to have it with Eve. And you're not going to have sovereignty over her seed. In fact, one of them is going to come and crush you on the head. We dig into this a little more you know, who was it that came to crush the serpent's head? It was the Lord Jesus Christ. And all we'll see, throughout history, throughout time, he did it on the cross. That was where he really rendered the blow. He pronounced his judgment in the garden, but the real death blow came at the cross. Satan thought man was now going to be the enemy of God. And God says, you're wrong. Man's going to be your enemy. I'm going to bring him back to be my friend. I'm going to make you his enemy. Now that is the first glimmer. I got to get ready for this. That's the first glimmer of the gospel. The first glimmer of the gospel. I want to make sure you heard that. That's the first one. The first glimmer of the gospel. The first and the enemy of Satan. God is going to do that. He says, I will put enmity there sovereignly. And again, I say, God didn't lose any of his power and he didn't lose any of his sovereignty. The paradigm shifted and God has to recover paradise. But he says to Satan, don't you think for one moment that you have now conquered all this earth? Because I will make man my friend and I will make him your enemy. And I say this again. That was the first glimmer of the gospel. The good news that who were once enemies of God can now become friends. So no one is lost. All of us were once enemies of God, but now we can say we're now friends of God. This is the end of part 2. Wasn't as long, but God bless you. And remember, this is why things are the way they are in the world today.